Excuse me? This is the wrong direction that I would like to go. How do I get to Batavia? With $150 tomorrow? Fucking quality. We're not going where the fucking lion tells us to go. That's a big no. That's an obvious trap. So we're not doing it. We gotta get to Hong Kong. We gotta get to Singapore. We gotta make money. I went out to explore the streets of Rangoon during the cool evening, but could not shake the strange, prickling sensation of being watched. I thought I heard a growl through the darkness and a faint glitter of intent eyes through the window, but I could not be sure. So, we're not going that way. Unless it's free. No, not even if it's free. We gotta get to Singapore. We have $4. We took a flying Chinth, a Leogrith-styled airship with enormous hammered copper wings. From Rangoon, the passengers were Burmese troops who were guarding a mysterious chest in the cargo hold. As we departed, I could not help but wonder if Manu Sia would wreak revenge on us for ignoring his instructions, or if his threats had been emptied all along. Just start begging everybody for money. I engaged one of the operators in conversation. Are you being posted to Batavia? I asked genially, trying to look comfortable strapped into my seat on the exposed back of the automaton. No, said the second lieutenant. Are you usually so loquacious? I asked ironically. No, he replied, and turned away. Well, thankfully, I did not have to bear the silence for too long as we swooped over the magnificent vista of Batavia. I saw why the Dutch called it Verhevenstad, the exalted city, for the fort floated above the swamplands below, melting into haphazard settlements that stretched inland. Market. We need $98 to get to fucking... How do we make this happen? We don't want to get the Atlantic. We can sell the European shipping timetable. We don't want to sell that. Can't get to Calcutta. We can lose this. And now we have the money. We need to get this to Singapore, definitely. And this to Singapore. We have a lot of things that are valuable in Singapore. Singapore needs to happen. We'll go to the hotel. The heart of Verhevenstad, the exalted city of Batavia, was a floating fort of gigantic iron struts built over the swamplands of Kalibasar and overlooking the Sunda Kalapa harbor. Dutch hotels and Chinese settlements dotted with Buddhist shrines pushed themselves up in the shadow of the walls hemmed in by the sprawling, unplanned Javanese kampongs. We took a room at the Hotel de Indies, a fairly comfortable establishment overlooking the water, where I watched the captain preparing his boat, the Spicy Jake, for passage to Singapore, a perfect place to rest, though through the window we heard the sounds of an unrestful city long into the night. So now we can get to we can get to Singapore on the Spicy Jake. No, where did all of my money go? How dare you? God damn it. Velvet sandals. We can probably lose the Caribbean timetable, yeah. Is that literally just enough money? No! Please. I need a loan of $2. English poetry it is. We can collapse things because we fucking sold everything we own. Alright. We just made it. We have $1. The only boat we could find from the fort of Batavia heading through the Pacific Islands to Singapore was the Spicy Jake, a Dutch vessel crewed by decent men of fortune. I gulped with alarm, but we did not stay ashore. We gotta take care of Mr. Fogg, because we're doing a lot of sea travel. Don't worry, we're coming into money. The atmosphere around the pirates was tense, to say the least. We made a special effort to befriend them, which essentially meant I sat up on the Sunset Oak deck and asked them to describe their bloody adventures in the mountains and tree-topped ridges that we passed. They seemed keen to talk, and their talk of throat-slitting went on for many hours. I listened with raised eyebrows and an expression of disgust. "Your laundry bills must be immense," I commented finally, and the men fell into paroxysms of laughter, slapping me on the back. "You," one declared, "are a card." The second day began with Singapore Harbor in sight. The captain came and found us. "I apologize if my men have made sport of you," he began in heavily accented English. "They are children, cruel but kind-hearted. Get us to port without incident, and the matter will be forgotten," I replied. The captain laughed. "No incidents. That is the secret of being a good sailor and a good businessman." He brought something from his pocket as he spoke. "And speaking of business, I have a proposition for you. I hope it doesn't involve any investment more than $1. "How may we help?" I replied. "I have been carrying this for some time," he said, opening his palm to reveal a small, gleaming ruby. "The dragon's eye," he said. "How I got it is not important, only that I haven't been able to sell it. It's worth a few thousand to the right buyer. Yours for 300. I have $1. He seemed surprised by my answer, but did not argue. "Well then, it seems I will stuck with it a while longer." With that, he swept away. We made port a few hours later. Get to the market. $720. $1,400. Anything that I can sell in... Oh my god. All sorts of money. We gotta get to Yokohama. And then we'll grab this since we're going to Singapore. Alright. Close that. We do have to rest. Singapore was a British colonial port peopled largely by Chinese, Malays, and Indians, and fueled by rubber exports and opium wealth pouring into the new banks. I walked along the harbor front and spied brightly painted airships and well-rigged boats heading for distant ports. I inquired about vessels headed for, Manila in the Spanish Philippines, and one of the Malay sailors pointed me in the direction of a little steam yacht. She goes to Manila, he said, and then cocked his head. Are you Spaniard? I am French, monsieur. Truly, I was growing tired of being so thoroughly misidentified. The sailor shrugged. Heard there's cholera in Manila. If you are not a Spaniard and have no business there, maybe you should avoid it. He shrugged again. Then again, you rich people do whatever you want, so why am I bothering? I'm not rich. Well, I am rich. I'm recently rich. I almost laughed and then saw his angry expression. I suppose to such a man I was well-dressed and well-fed and had little right to deny my relative wealth. The sailor jerked a nod and went back to his companions, leaving me to contemplate his advice upon the Singaporean dock. Oh look, a new trade route which I'm pretty sure I already knew about. We're not using that one. Instead, we will be going... Not there. We will be going... No! Why do you do this to me? Why is there no... Oh no. I better be able to get to Yokohama. In 2 days. You know what? 2 days is fine. 2 days is just perfect. We're getting to fucking Hong Kong. Took a few hours to explore, investigating various options for how we might continue our journey. Are we really not allowed to go to fucking Hong Kong? Oh my god. I have so many... Why does it draw... I wish... My biggest complaint about the game is I wish there were lines in these travel routes. Just a big line or like an arrow that shows me that I can't go to fucking Hong Kong from Singapore for some bizarre reason. We'll rest in the hotel. I found a local doctor to attend to my poor master. She took my master's blood pressure and checked his tongue. 4 days to recover his strength. There was no alternative. There we go. In 4 days. We're negotiating. Did that bring it down to 3 days? Oh, great. Stay at the hotel and try to... As night fell, we lost all our money. 2 days? Yeah. One more day. We'll head to Manila. We'll get extra space and we'll go. We took passage on a little steam yacht with a cargo hold full of Chinese silk parasols, which the captain assured me would fetch an exorbitant price in Manila. Are the ladies there so shy of the sun? I asked in Spanish. These pretty moneymakers are only passing through Manila. Captain Amparo, a dark-eyed Filipina of middle years, was unable to keep the glee from her voice. I will sell them to a trader for shipment to Acapulco, where the Mexican ladies will pay all their pin money for a month for just one gaudy parasol. Will you keep one for yourself? I could not resist asking. Me? She looked astonished. What use would I have for such a frippery? I regarded her sensible attire and short hair. I admire your practicality. Captain Amparo laughed companionably. That is a skill I have always possessed. I slept well that night aboard the steam yacht, secure in the knowledge that it was being steered by the captain's steady hands. Does Manila go to Hong Kong? Yes. Yes. We could take an airship to Hong Kong. You better not be lying to me. I will murder you. I will murder you. We had some ill winds in the morning, but Captain Amparo kept the crew calm and focused, shouting orders at them in a language I did not know. Tagalog, perhaps, as it was widely spoken in the Philippines. We were merely bobbed about a little until the weather settled, but the worst injury was some seawater clogging my shoes. We will not be delayed, Captain Amparo assured me, perhaps mistaking the cause of my obvious melancholy. My master will be pleased, I said, though I could not help cast another mournful look at my ruined shoes. The captain caught the direction of my gaze and looked confounded. My God, you are an utter dandy. Do you really care so much for appearances? The gentleman is always presentable, I sniffed. I do not care for fashion's sake. Captain Amparo had taken to regarding me as though I were the oddest creature to ever take passage aboard her vessel, and she still looked thunderstruck when we reached our destination. Good luck in Manila, she said, shaking my hand. They will hardly know what to make of you. Market, gold silk. Don't have anything on American train timetable. It's only $3. If we wind up in America. Which we probably will if we're going through Yokohama. But I would like to go to Hong Kong, which arrives tomorrow at noon, which is perfectly fine by me. Except how much is it? $140. So hopefully the hotel won't take literally all our fucking money. There we go. Well, this does go straight to Yokohama though, but we can probably go through... Maybe hit... We're fucking... Major typhoon, and the efforts at rebuilding have been stalled by an outbreak of the dreaded cholera morbus. Images of San Roque, a saint invoked against pestilence, decorated almost every building and vehicle, but to little effect. Infected establishments were burned daily by the sanitary board, with our hotel one of the casualties. We located near to the telephone exchange, taking a mechanical horse-pulled tram. Concerned with the possibility of infection, I assured Monsieur Fogg. Let's see. Cholera. Drink only boiled water as recommended by Jon Snow's article in the Medical Times and Gazette, going to the lengths of preventing him from eating any uncooked foods for fear of contamination. From our window I could see carts piled high with the dead being taken to the mountain to be burned rather than interred in a churchyard, which put me in a morbid frame of mind. I went to the local telegraph office and sent a message to a dear Mama, full of earnest declarations of filial adoration. I will not tell you of its particulars, but I am not ashamed to admit their sentimentality. I made my way back to Monsieur Fogg under the fragrant coconut oil lamps, eager to part from the city riven by sickness and death. Do we just go to Yokohama, or do we try to see how much our silk sells in Hong Kong? And Iloek wants to go to Pyongyang. We are running out of days. We are running out of days, and if we run out of days, that's no good. We might just have to go straight to Yokohama. So what we'll do is we will sell our... Oh, but these sell in Pyongyang. We'll sell them. They're gone. We gotta take these to Yokohama. Or this to Yokohama. And that's it. We'll stay in the hotel. We'll get some money to help with pay for the hotel, and we will go straight to Yokohama on the Sugawara. Sugawara was an Imperial Japanese steamship designed by French engineers and crewed by naval conscripts drawn from all four occupations. Captain Hirosue bowed slightly in greeting, and I gave her a deeper bow of respect, which caused her to raise an approving eyebrow. "Welcome aboard," she told us as the crew raced about readying the ship for departure. "With God's grace, we will have a swift journey." I encountered Captain Hirosue on deck in the morning and noticed that she wore a katana in a beautifully worked sheath. "That is a beautiful weapon," I said reverently, having been swept away by the recent Parisian fashion for Japonisme. Japonisme? Captain Hirosue ducked her head a little. "It is not a military issue." "That's an issue." "Gunt square," she admitted. "It has personal value to me." I made a sound of encouragement, but she did not take the cue to continue. "Oh, well, there would be enough time to get to know the captain better on our journey to Yokohama. There's a lot of lady captains we're getting to know." In the morning, I saw Captain Hirosue praying at the little Protestant chapel beside the galley. "What do you pray for, Captain?" I asked. "I pray for the health and long life of Emperor Meiji," she said, so fervently that the commonplace words rang with truth. "He looks to the west and thus towards progress." I considered her words. "Are you a product of this progress?" Her hand closed over the hilt of her katana. 5 years ago, it was illegal for a peasant or woman to wear a sword. Now Emperor Meiji has given me a warship. "Progress does not have to deny the past," Captain Hirosue laughed. "Eastern morals, Western technology," she shook her head. "You sound like my father and uncles. They are samurai. The men of my family are all samurai." "Is that why you joined the Navy?" "No," Captain Hirosue closed her eyes. "My father is still loyal to his daimyo and fights against the Emperor." "You fight against your own family?" I whispered, shocked. "I requested a foreign posting so I would not be sent to battle the rebels." The captain looked troubled. "But if my emperor sends me, I must go." "What does your mother think?" "That my father and I are fools, no doubt." The captain's eyes lifted with rueful laughter. "Still, she rather likes the Sugawara." An officer came to fetch Captain Hirosue away for some pressing duties, and I was left with my whirling thoughts. Yokohama goes to Honolulu. Here we go. Yokohama goes through an airship which seems to go to San Francisco. Yokohama Harbor was thronged with steamships flying foreign flags. Dutch, French, British, American, even a few Russian ones. The Sugawara was a regal sight as she pulled up to the docks. "Good health to your emperor, Captain," I called as we disembarked. Captain Hirosue only smiled and bowed, perhaps a little more deeply than we had boarded. "We should visit Alcatraz. But first, $6,000. Are we gonna be in Salt Lake City? We might go to Salt Lake City. We can go down to one thing out here. Whoosh! San Francisco. It takes 14 days, and it shows up tomorrow, and it takes $4,000. Well, we'll explore. It was hard to believe that Yokohama had only relatively recently opened to foreigners. There was an entire foreigners district not far from the waterfront where it was as common to hear Chinese or Russian as Japanese. There were several varieties of English to choose from as well, though Monsieur Fogg would have barely deigned to include the nasal tongue of the American merchants. I noticed a Japanese man watching the scene with a look of intense concentration and scribbling in a sketchbook. I leaned in for a look. He was drawing a stylized picture of the foreign quarters with quick pen strokes, which stopped abruptly as my shadow fell over the drawing. He looked up, clearly irritated. "Do you mind?" he said, his accent an unholy mix of Dutch, French, and English. I was making a drawing for a woodcut. Why does that American appear drunk? I wondered aloud, and he covered his drawing jealously. It is an artistic impression of the foreigners, he stretched. Well, it is certainly artistic, I allowed. The scene on the page was much more lively than the merchants haggling and their wives and children riding about in carriages. You are a very strange people, he pronounced after a brief silence. Everyone is strange, I replied thoughtfully, thinking of my travels. He shrugged, clearly unconvinced. He colored one of the women's skirts lovingly, his hand on the page much gentler and kinder than his voice had been. Finally, he thrust the pen in my direction, assuring me that it was only a preliminary sketch. I accepted gracefully, charmed that he had chosen to bestow a gift upon a near stranger, and I stored it carefully. It was a fine souvenir of Yokohama. And Fogg liked that. So we'll stay in the hotel, and we're going to go visit Alcatraz. I can't do money things. So let's depart. It's going to take 2 weeks, 14 days, and I'm pretty sure we're going to run out of time. Oh, this isn't an airship. I think that was Manila to something else. The Water Lily was a sleek iron-hulled ship-to-submarine prototype, captained by a severe American by the name of Wicker, who wore a top hat at all times and preferred tea to coffee, which greatly endeared him to Monsieur Fogg. In addition to the usual complement, the Water Lily carried an entire corps of brass-goggled engineers and a brace of submariners on standby should the captain call the order to submerge. The rumor was that she was a Confederate vessel sold off to private concern in the later, more desperate stages of the Civil War. But I saw no trace of the dark past aboard. The crew seemed a happy family and welcomed us into their iron-hulled bosom. I don't think we're going to make the deadline. Our cabin, while hardly spacious, was adequate to our needs. One of the midshipmen came by to show us how to use the pressure seals in case of submersion, but in all other aspects, I looked forward to a peaceful steamship ocean crossing. I was not to be so lucky. The salty air blew cool and sharp against my face as I opened the door onto the top deck. It was painfully early, and the only passengers awake were a group of Chinese laborers hunched miserably near the stern. One of their number was vomiting copiously into a bucket. I offered him my own secret remedy, which I had brewed up for such an occasion. He swallowed it down with certain dubious desperation, but immediately improved in both complexion and temperament. He thanked me profusely. I asked them about the captain, but with no language in common, communication was impossible, so we settled into playing dice in quiet silence until the sun rose. I accompanied Monsieur Fogg to a game of whist with a family of American missionaries who were traveling back to San Francisco for a family wedding. My master began strongly, but Mademoiselle Loretta, the eldest girl, had a sharp eye and won several hands in a row. A new round was dealt. I noticed Mademoiselle Loretta slip a card into her sleeve. I blinked twice in pure astonishment and glanced up at her face, which was utterly calm, betraying nothing of the action of her nimble fingers. The minister's daughter was a cheat, and a skilled one at that. I filed away the knowledge for an opportune moment, catching her eye to convey that I had noticed her little sleight of hand. She blushed with all the manufactured prettiness of an accomplished actress, then raised one eyebrow in silent challenge. Our journey continued on. I spent a day in the company of the Water Lily submariners. They were all hardy men and women who preferred the dim and closed spaces of the hold to the top deck. Too much sky, one of them said, squinting suspiciously. Her crewmate nodded. All that fresh air. They shuddered collectively and suggested a bracing race to the boiler room. I impressed them with my physical prowess, coming in a respectable fourth behind their commander. She was a half-Japanese, half-American sailor by the name of Davis. "Izumi to my friend," she said, clapping me heavily on the shoulder. "Now, a rematch of your choice." "Very well," I declared, and promptly suggested a test of acrobatic skill. The submariners were all fit as horses. They had never attempted to, for instance, form a pyramid or walk the length of a corridor on their hands. I hustled them most dishonorably, pretending at first to be clumsy and off balance, only to suddenly discover a talent for scaling bulkheads. The sailors cheered and admitted themselves outclassed. Commander Davis even applauded. Izumi nodded as I took my leave. "You're not so bad." "Greetings, mademoiselle. Tell me about Burlington." I was climbing the rigging as exercise, of course, and not at all for the purposes of spying on the crew to appease my own rapacious curiosity when I heard two of the crewmen arguing in a pidgin mix of English and Japanese. I closed my eyes and listened to their voices. Only a few words were audible over the howling of the wind. Shrine, heathen, worship. Before a sudden scream rent the air, one of the sailors was falling from the platform's edge. I was unable to look away as he fell. His body lay still and crumpled on the deck, but I heard a scream in my head for days after. I looked up and managed to catch sight of the fallen sailor's companion, his face still and pallid. Was that guilt in his eyes or merely shocked? He slipped away before the captain arrived, and I followed him. He retired to his crew quarters, and I began to hear the sound of desperate muttered prayers. "Something's afoot on the Water Lily." I hope that's not picking up on the mic. The Water Lily's crew held a funeral for the dead sailor. I was not specifically invited, but felt a sense of responsibility, having witnessed the man's fatal plunge. Captain Wicker led the Christian service with customary grimness. I was surprised by the absence of the American minister, but later discovered that the captain was of a different denomination, and considered the missionary and his family only a short step up from heathens. Oddly, only half the crew had come to pay their respects. I went in search of the rest, only to find them making an offering in front of a makeshift Shinto shrine in the crew quarters. The fellow from the night before was amongst them. "The captain doesn't want us at his Christian ceremonies. He thinks nothing of our faith," one of the soldiers told me bitterly. "We make our offerings here instead." Storm. Too exhausted to write a proper entry. Suffice to say we are still afloat. As we settled down for the night, I was struck by an unrelated thought. Monsieur Fogg, the dateline. I have altered our watch already, Monsieur Fogg replied calmly. Did you think I might forget? My master was, of course, correct. With an eye such as his, it was unthinkable that he might miss such a detail. We had reached the point directly opposite Greenwich, where the hours we had lost in traveling around the Earth were added back, a whole extra day. Hooray! I don't think it's going to do us much. Yesterday's storm hit us with little warning. One moment I was preparing Monsieur Fogg's shaving water to exactly the right temperature, the next we were being tossed from one end of the cabin to the other. We were only lucky that the bed was securely nailed to the floor. The ship shuddered and moaned as the sea, oh my god, flickered with lightning. The storm lasted nearly 6 hours and blew us far off course. The captain spent most of the day peering at his charts trying to locate our position. There was no land anywhere upon the horizon. Day 60, Monsieur Fogg murmured that night in his sleep, and still some distance yet to travel. Oh no, it's going to take longer than 2 weeks.